I know the Illuminate are the new big thing right now that's gotten everyone excited, myself included, but they were released alongside a new set of urban map generation and an urban-flavored warbond. That warbond has the best stratagem in the whole game, another one that's a straight upgrade to a vanilla one, and quite possibly the worst secondary available right now, so it's a bit of a mixed bag. Fitting, I suppose, because so is the so-called urban warfare, where you cannot enter buildings. Across its many planets, Helldivers 2 has maybe only a dozen or so map types. There's the forests of Martal, the ashes of Hellmire, the red rocks of Ubanaya, the jungles of Tarsh, the grey fog of Penta, moons like Clourel, the moody forests of Malevelon Creek, the rocky mushroom mountains of Chort Bay, Classa's woodlands, the desolate wastes of Vernon Wells, the depressed snow of Lasath, the xenofauna of Zephia, the hellish deserts of Mastia, and my favorite, the cold winters of Marfark. These are the planet types that are repeated all over the galaxy, and they add a good deal of variety and new scenes to see. I think that without fail, they are all extremely pretty, and this game's environment design is remarkable considering how much of it is procedural. With the Illuminate, now cities may be placed upon these, which seems like it would be a multiplier to map variety, but given that they're all the same on every planet, it's more like a single addition to the list. It is a very significant addition though, as cities play far differently from the variety of other wastelands available. Except that they don't, really. Super Earth cities don't really stand up to the slightest bit of scrutiny. It's a bunch of rectangles on a grid. And that honestly could be fine. It doesn't necessarily need to be convincing, it just needs to be interesting to play in. I think, for the most part, they succeed on where it matters on initial inspection. Objectives are placed in pretty interesting environments which are both gameplay-wise and visually a breath of fresh air from the rest of the game. Clap clap, well done. But, and this is a large one, I don't think they mesh very well with Helldivers as a whole very well, and they've been implemented in such a way that really hampers replay value and how interesting they will continue to be. I do think urban environments have a lot of potential, because room clearing building-to-building CQC is extremely novel for Helldivers, as most of its fights are just in a desolate wasteland or bot factories. But, the doors are all painted on. These are all big cereal boxes disguised as houses. The same cereal boxes, every street, every planet. I know the obvious retort is that their city is how much could you change, and, well, the answer is a lot. There's another game that did city generation this way, XCOM 2. Its maps are composed of a wide variety of different pre-made areas, which are called parcels, snapped together like puzzle pieces or building blocks, which, just to be clear, is exactly how Helldivers cities are made. And one of the biomes featured in XCOM 2 was city centers, very similar to the cities of Helldivers 2. To compare it to Helldivers cities' layouts, Super Earth cities are pretty much all the same. The only thing that changes are where their walls end and biome begins. XCOM 2 made its cities in a much more thoughtful way than Helldivers has. There are many more parcels to choose from, yes, but more importantly they're designed in such a way that lets them combine together in a lot more unique ways, and sometimes layered ways. Sometimes there are wide streets, other times lots of buildings, maybe an overpass, or a wide courtyard with the god-awful half-cover everywhere, and gas stations. This is really important to me for some reason. There's no gas stations in Helldivers. How am I supposed to believe this? Not all parcels are created equal though, unlike Helldivers. In Helldivers, just about every one of its parcels take up about the same space and are placed in the same ways in the streets. In XCOM 2, parcels have varying sizes, and most of them are relatively small, and so their combinations are more unique. Helldivers cities are all grids with the exact same buildings copy-pasted everywhere in the same places. To get across just how samey they are, ignoring the objective parcels, the grid city layout is occasionally broken up by, practically, 8 possible unique parcels. 8. I know this is maybe showing my work a little too much, but let me show you each one of the total 8 parcels that aren't tied to objectives that can spawn in the middle of cities to break them up, which are more than just a giant rectangle. The most common is this raised throughway. This parcel is huge, by the way, and once you realize it's one thing copied everywhere, you will never unsee it. Then there's this radio tower type thing with crates that can sometimes have a vault, the trench. A raised overhang building which always has an alleyway next to it with a fenced-in set of supplies in the building over, and quite a large parcel that makes an alleyway. On its corner, it always generates either a podium, raised podium, or Helldivers statue. That brings our total to 8. 8 parcels for all the parts of the city that aren't objectives. Well, there is this 9th one, which is pretty big and unique, creating interesting situations to fight in, but because of how small the cities are, it practically never generates. Going around noting how many parcels there are for this video and how they generate for several hours, I never saw it generate once. If there were more of these, that would be great, but the cities need to get bigger with them so they actually spawn. There are some extra parcels which seem like they should be able to generate anywhere, like this alleyway or this billboard building, but as far as I can tell, these are actually always tied to, once again, an objective. They're next to grounded illuminate ships, and so rarely generate. The Destroy Harvesters objective on lower difficulties even spawns these completely unique parks and courtyards, which would be great as just normal city spawns not attached to anything. They already did the work, just make it viewable. And so that really is it, those 8.5. No effort was made to ensure they don't spawn next to each other either, and so you will often see stuff like this where two of the exact same parcel are pretty much touching. XCOM 2, for reference, has 40 parcels for city centers alone, and that is one area type of about 10 to 15. Needless to say, every Helldiver city feels the same. This is so few parcels that you have a good chance for every single one of them to generate in one map, which is obviously pretty bad for variety. Not every parcel is made even either, as some of these, namely this one with the crates, spawn way more often than the others, making the variety feel even worse. The outer city has this problem too. The only clear, obvious exits out of these cities that aren't at a corner is always this parcel with a destroyed truck next to an underground tunnel, which recently has been coming with a commemorative question mark of freedom. If you ever need to find a way out of the city, look for the destroyed truck. There's at least 6 of them on average. Of the unique parcels that there are, I do quite like them, and it shows that the devs are clearly capable of making unique spaces for encounters. This Raise a Flag courtyard especially is a huge breath of fresh air, but with only 3 entry points and a healthy dose of verticality. I still wish that I could do more in these areas than the same thing every time. It is a real shame that any interesting geometry is tied to objectives, and that it's always the same set of parcels for each objective. To once again look at XCOM 2, it more often than not just threw the objective somewhere in a parcel. Even if the parcel was identical, the objective could be somewhere else, or it could be an entirely different objective altogether. In Helldivers, if you see this sunken playpen, it is time to raise a flag in the center of it. There are a whole 3 sub-objectives that can spawn in cities: Sief SAMs, Sief Artillery, and the new Cognitive Disruptor. The Disruptor is amazing, but the Sief assets really overstay their welcome. The SAMs are all the same, and the Artillery didn't get a unique parcel, and so it looks completely out of place. I'm not even sure if it was meant to spawn here at all, frankly. The lack of variety is the only reason I can assume they decided to make the cities so small. To hide it, I guess. Even that doesn't really work because the variety of the outer city is even worse, as shown by our destroyed truck earlier. The objective parcels are consistently good, though it's quite immersion breaking that if you see somewhere that's interesting, it means that there's always going to be an objective there. The objectives they chose for the Illuminate are also terrible. Seriously, the Save Civilians mission? Especially now, these could be frantic street defenses where you have hundreds of targets and are forced to quickly determine the voteless from the voteful, but instead, it is the same press button mission. As the Illuminate have been on many planets now, I can say with absolute certainty that not once has a biome ever made an impact on city generation. They are all the same regardless of planet, apart from maybe a little snow texture on the roads of ice planets. Helldivers has a really great selection of different varied biomes already, and the cities being entirely divorced from them is a real shame. Even in a relatively homogeneous culture like America, cities up in the cold north are quite different from the ones down south, and that has nothing to do with the Trader Belt. Different climates just necessitate different standards. Not only are all of Super Earth's buildings identical regardless of climate, there's no beachside resort or ski lodge to stumble upon, it's just the same city everywhere. I think this is so obviously a bad thing that I'm not gonna belabor the point. I should be able to tell what biome a clip was recorded on at a glance, but I straight up can't with any of the cities because they all look identical save for their sky color. Now, it is a pretty funny joke that Super Earth would design all of its cities in the exact same way to promote cohesion, but there was another faction that did the exact same thing: Advent. XCOM 2's city centers were also literally a propaganda tool made to unify the populace regardless of where they were, and their city's diverse layouts really doesn't take away from that at all. To give Helldivers some credit really quick, I do think the implication of the SAM sites in each of these cities is extremely funny. All of Super Earth's cities have anti-air defense in them, but they have to be manually turned on via elite operatives that arrive via orbital insertion after the populace and the planet is basically already lost. For reference, this is like if the US's missile defense systems needed to be manually turned on after warheads already hit American soil, and they sent Delta Force to do it for every single one. And this isn't a complaint, this is hilarious. If this is ever addressed, I hope it's for some incredibly minor reason, like Sam's having a 5 super credit upkeep cost per day or something. It's a shame there's only 2 Sam site parcel though. Plenty of objectives are like this in the wilds too, but it was significantly less notable there because you weren't surrounded by the samey streets all the time and instead varied terrain. Of what relatively unique parcels Helldivers does have, the alleyways and elevated segments in some of these are fun, but because they are sectioned off from each other, they can't look cohesive at all. It leads to ridiculous stuff like this, with 2 inexplicably raised sections next to each other with a dip in the middle. XCOM didn't work like this and could pull off a height change that did fit in with the rest of the level. Because of this, there's no way to have convincingly done something like a walkway between 2 buildings, which would have been awesome. It's not the only reason that's impossible though, because how do I break the news? There's no way to enter a building. I've been dancing around this in my script, but if you can't go into the buildings, what is the point of urban warfare? The largest shakeup that fighting in a city brings is having to clear buildings room to room. And it's absent entirely? In Helldivers, fighting in streets really isn't all too different from fighting in a wasteland. One is just more flat and less varied. I think the reason it's like this is the AI. Even with near-identical city layouts on every planet, enemy AI is still regularly having mental breakdowns, phasing through walls, and Skyrim horsing. This game's AI was made to deal with huge open plains, and I think the worry is that they would absolutely shit the bed if forced to deal with relatively complicated building layouts. They already have enough problems with walking in a straight line without breaking their spine, so I kinda get the worry, but that's not enough of an excuse for me. Urban warfare without buildings is like combined arms without any vehicles. If the AI truly is the issue, then destructible environments are the answer, which is something that already exists. Battlefield worked this out like 15 years ago. If Hulks can't reliably get upstairs, then have them take out the whole damn building instead. Segment the destruction a lot more so entire buildings don't go up when they get clipped by a hell pod, and I've just described XCOM 2 again, haven't I? Seriously, copy XCOM 2. They got it right. So, to recap, the largest problems with the implementation of urban warfare in Helldivers are a killer lack of diversity first and foremost, followed by buildings being inaccessible, and then how little the planet the city is on matters. There is one singular reason that I can pin being responsible for all of this. It's their insistence on the city grid layout. Have you seen cities? They aren't built like this. Some cities do default to grids in their most metropolitan areas, of course, but the vast majority of every single road on Earth is a result of geographical circumstance. Helldivers already has a really good, robust terrain generation system that I have genuinely never seen screw up, unlike, well, the rest of the game, or some other games. I really wish they hooked the city generation into the already fantastic terrain generation, not their own completely isolated thing that is literally walled off from the rest of the world. They took their kind of terrible place of interest system where pre-made prefabs can be plonked into the world generation and made the cities entirely out of that system. As a result of literally everything being pre-made, there is basically no dynamic or interesting city generation that even can occur. I'm not sure how they will expand on the cities either. It's going to be a hard sell to get people really excited for the game by a couple more random pieces of map gen. They'd need something to come along that's much more marketable. Perhaps offensive city missions instead of purely defensive ones will be that something? Hard to say. Whatever they choose, I sincerely hope they get around to actually implementing the Halo flag planting that was in the tutorial. Apologies if any segments in this video seem, like, off. I did a relatively last-minute pass to add a bunch of positivity to the script on this video because I noticed that I was coming off far too negative for how generally positive on the update I feel, and how good of an addition I still think it could be. Their implementation of cities is quite disappointing right now, but it's still a welcome sight, and the Illuminate that they came with are good, hopefully great when more enemies roll around. Let me know if I still came off too, how do I put this, hey, what's up, guys? Oh, and one last thing. The cities are good for farming. Normally people put this kind of information in a 15-minute YouTube video called, like, the best way to farm, super credits, and Helldivers too fast, but my patrons are the reason why I don't have to do that. You get yourself a car and some speedy armor, take it to a level 1 city mission, currently that's just the Illuminate, stop for the capsules and this parcel that can have a vault, and then either drive around the outside for whatever POIs are left, or just head straight back to your ship and repeat. It took about an hour of doing this to get enough super credits for a war bond. See, that explanation was 15 seconds long. It's not that hard to be concise. You should really have... Look, viewer, you watching this video right now, you should have higher standards for your time. Stop watching slop. There are better things for you to do with your life. Go draw, go participate in a hobby you like. I don't know, go clubbing. I don't know, what the hell, whatever the hell people do these days. Just stop watching these terrible videos that go on and on. Do you know how much money these people make from you having the standards of an amoeba? Thanks to my patrons, Emmy and Potato especially. Like, comment, subscribe, you know the drill, and have a good night.